So my name is Sam Resecker, and this is my adoption story. Sometimes when I tell people that I'm adopted, I can tell in their facial expressions or in their body language that they kind of relate being adopted to a sad or unfortunate event. And I can't speak for every adopted person, but the words unwanted or unloved, they're just not a part of my story. There's just a very clear underlying theme, and that's love. In 1982, Lorraine and Russ Russick had been married for about 12 years, and after having trouble conceiving and health issues, they decided that adoption would be the way that they added children to their family. With that in mind, they told their adoption caseworker that they would be open to adopting a special needs child. In 1985 then, both my birth parents were in college, and neither were in a position where they were able to provide the life that they wanted for me. So my birth mom chose adoption. Shortly after I was born, a few hours after I was born, I stopped breathing. And because of that, the doctors admitted me to the neonatal ICU. I spent 12 days in the hospital, and my birth mom stayed with me during that time. After those 12 days, she did sign the relinquishment papers allowing me to be adopted. That same day, I went home with Russ and Lorraine, better known as Dad and Mom. So I've always known that I was adopted. At a very young age, they started sharing my adoption story with me, and they always presented it in a way where love was at the foundation of the story. I had an incredible childhood. There was times that I would even forget that I was adopted because I was never treated any differently. I knew that I belonged. I knew that that was my home, my family. And I knew that I was loved unconditionally, even through the teenage years. I've always enjoyed sharing my adoption story, but even more so now as a Christ follower. I grew up intermittently attending church, but my heart and my mind just weren't open to learning at that time. So as an adult in 2005, a coworker of mine invited me to come to church with her. And I declined a couple times, and eventually I went with her one Sunday morning. I did attend a few times after that, but ultimately stopped going. So it was in 2012, so 7 years later, when I was reading a children's Bible story to my daughter Madison. When we got to the end of the story, she just asked me, she said, "Mama, is that a true story?" And I answered real easily. I said, "Yes, all the stories in the Bible are true." And that was enough for her. That was enough for her childlike faith to accept and just move on to the next activity. But I sat there for a little bit just thinking to myself, do I really think that all the stories in the Bible are true? And if I do, then why am I not living my life according to what the Bible says? So soon thereafter, our family started going to Brazos Point, and my husband, myself, and our two oldest kiddos all stepped over the line of faith and were baptized. So my adoption journey has taught me about God's love in that He can take what we may consider a mess or a mistake, and He can weave beauty and grace and love into it. He can take the really hard situations, the really scary, and just make them beautiful nonetheless. So I've learned that I don't have to fully understand the situation in order to fully trust in Him. As a Christ follower, I can now look back on my life and see God's grace and mercy so clearly from the very, very beginning, really before I ever took my first breath. The peace I feel knowing that I am fearfully and wonderfully made, never unloved or unwanted. It's a a peace that can be really hard to explain. I am fully known, and still He chooses to call me a child of God. I have been adopted and now belong to the kingdom of heaven. My adoption story isn't simply another love story, it's God's love story.